So this is a 50-mark question. Part A. Ed works as an IT technician. He has a time card for recording the hours he works every week. His time card for 1 week is shown below. Some information is missing. So we need to fill in these blanks. So this is what we fill in. And I'm going to show you now where each of the numbers came from. So part 1, complete the time card above to show the total daily hours, the total weekday hours, the total weekday overtime hours, and the total Saturday, Sunday hours that Ed worked. Give each of your answers as a decimal, correct 2 decimal places. So starting off with this box here, okay? So Wednesday. So Ed finished at 17:30. So we're going to start with 17:30, highlighted there in yellow. He started at 7:55. So we're going to subtract 7:55 from 17:30. And he also had a break of 50 minutes. So we're also going to subtract 50 minutes. And we put our answer as a decimal, as an hour, into this box. So the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite 17:30 as 16:90 because we can't subtract 55 minutes from 30. So we're going to have to borrow an hour, and there's 60 minutes in an hour. So we're borrowing an hour from the 17. So 17 minus 1 is 16 because we borrowed the hour. And we're adding the hour, which is 60 minutes, onto the 30. And 30 plus 60 makes 90. So we just rewrite 17:30 as 16:90. And then we're going to subtract the 7:55. So 90 minutes, take away 55 minutes, leaves us with 35 minutes. And 16 hours, take away 7 hours, leaves us with 9 hours. So then we go again. So we're going to start with 9:35 and we're going to subtract 50 minutes. And again, we have to borrow an hour because we can't do 35 minutes minus 50 minutes. So we're going to borrow an hour from the 9. So the 9 becomes 8 because 9 minus 1 is 8. And we're going to add on the hour, which is 60 minutes, to the 35 minutes. So 60 minutes plus 35 minutes gives us 95 minutes. So 9:35 becomes 8:95. So 95 minutes take away 50 minutes is 45 minutes. And 8 hours take away 0 is just 8. So it works out to be 8 hours and 45 minutes. Now we want it as an hour. So we need to change the 45 minutes into an hour, so into a decimal. So we start off by changing it into a fraction. So we're going to do 45 divided by 60 because there's 60 minutes in an hour. And then you can just stick it into the calculator. You'll get 8.75. So 45 over 60 simplifies to 3/4, which as a decimal is 0.75. So we get 8.75. And that's hours. So just be very careful here because they want it specifically in hours. They don't want it in hours and minutes. Now we're going to figure out what goes in Thursday's box. So in the same way, we're going to do 16:50, which is the finish time, minus 8 a.m., which is the start time, minus the 45 minutes break. So do 16:50 take away 8 hours. Now we don't need to borrow this time. We don't need to borrow any hours. So 50 minutes take away 0 minutes is 50 minutes. And 16 take away 8 is just 8. So we've 8 hours and 50 minutes. And then we're going to subtract the break, which is 0 hours and 45 minutes. Again, we don't need to borrow here because 50 minutes take away 45 minutes is 5 minutes. And 8 take away 0 is 8. So 8 hours and 5 minutes. Now we have to change this into a decimal. So we're going to do 5 minutes divided by 60 because there's 60 minutes in an hour. And into the calculator, and you'll get 8.08 hours. And that's why we fill that in there, 8.08 hours. So next we're going to work out what goes in this box. So Saturday, you'll notice there's no break. So it's going to be 13:45, which is the finish time, minus 8:15, which is the start time. We don't need to borrow any minutes or borrow any hours. So 45 minutes take away 15 minutes is 30 minutes. And 13 hours take away 8 hours is 5 hours. So 5 hours and 30 minutes we need to change it into a decimal. So 30 minutes divided by 60, because there's 60 minutes in an hour, gives us 5.5 hours, which makes sense because 5 hours and 30 minutes is 5.5 hours. So 5.5 hours goes in that box there. So then we're going to add up the total weekday hours. So I've highlighted here in yellow the total weekday hours to figure out what goes in this box here. And we get 41.75 hours. Now, you don't need to worry about your hours and your minutes here because this is all just hours. So you can literally stick all the numbers highlighted in yellow straight into your calculator. You don't need to do any conversions because we're in hours here. So 41.75 hours goes in that box. It's a 39-hour week, so we need to subtract 39 from 41.75 to figure out what overtime they did. So it worked out to be 2.75 hours overtime. And then to figure out the total Saturday and Sunday hours, we're going to add 5.5 and 2.25 to get 7.75 hours. So that goes in there. 7.75 hours was the total Saturday and Sunday hours. So for part 2, we're going to use some of these numbers. Ed is paid €17.10 per hour for standard weekday hours. He's paid time and a half for weekday overtime and Saturday, Sunday work. Calculate Ed's gross wage for the week. Give your answer correct to the nearest cent. So his weekday hours is 39 times 17.10. So 39 hours times 17.10. So that's €666.90. His weekday overtime is 2.75, so that comes from here, 2.75 times the €17.10 from the question, multiplied by 1.5 for time and a half. And we get €70.5375, and to the nearest cent, the 3 is the rounding digit, the 7 is the telling digit, and the 7 tells the 3 to round up. So we get approximately equal to €70.54. The total Saturday and Sunday hours is 7.75, so that's from down here, multiplied by the 17.10 from the question, multiplied by 1.5, which represents time and a half. So we get 198.7875, which we round off to €198.79. The gross wage, therefore, is $666.90, which we got from here, plus the 70.54, which we got from here, plus the 198.79, which we got from here, which gives €936.23, correct to the nearest cent. So this is his gross wage for the week. B, part 1. Another week, Ed works H hours above his standard 39-hour week. Write a formula in H, so in terms of H, for Ed's gross wage for that week. So this formula must have a H in it. So 39 is the amount of hours in the standard week, multiplied by 17.10. That's how much he's paid per hour. So that comes from the question in part 2. We're going to add that on to 17.10. Again, that's how much he's paid per hour, multiplied by 1.5, which is time and a half, multiplied by H. So we're setting up our formula. Now we have to just simplify our formula. So 39 times 17.10 is 666.9. And then 17.10 multiplied by 1.5 multiplied by H is 25.65 H. So a formula for the gross wage is 666.9 plus 25.65 H. So this is our formula for the gross wage. And this is a 5-mark question. Part 2, hence, which means working out using what you just worked out in the previous part. So using this formula, we're going to use this formula now in a minute. So hence, find the minimum number of whole hours Ed must work above his standard week in order to receive a gross wage in excess of €850. Just note here it says number of whole hours because he might work 9 hours, he might work 10 hours, he might work 11 hours, but he doesn't work, for example, 9.1 hours or 9.2 hours. So it's whole hours we're interested in. So we want to figure out when he earns at least 850 euro. So he might earn above that, that's fine, but he has to earn at least 850 euro. So how many hours must he work so that he comes out with at least 850 euro? So we start with the formula. From part 1, gross wage is equal to 666.9 plus 25.65h. We're going to replace gross wage with 850. So that was given in the question. And then we're going to solve for h. We're going to get h on its own. So solve for h, we're going to bring the 666.9 across the equal sign and it will become minus. So we get minus 666.9 plus 850 is equal to 25.65h. That gives us 183.1, which is still equal to 25.65h. Now to get the h on its own, we divide by the number in front of the h. So we divide by 25.65, and what we do to the right, we do to the left. So dividing on the right by 25.65, they just cancel out, so you're just left with h. And then on the left, 183.1 divided by 25.65 is 7.1384 hours. Now we're not going to round down to 7 hours, we're going to round up to 8 hours because he has to do at least 7.13 hours to get at least 850 euro. And he can't do 7.13 hours, that doesn't make sense. So he has to do 8 hours. So the minimum number of whole hours is 8 hours. He will earn more than 850 euro, but we're interested in when he will earn in excess of that. So at least 850 euro, so above that. Part C. Ed earns a gross wage of 875 euro this week. He pays income tax, universal social charge USC, and pay-related social insurance PRSI on his gross wage. Part 1. Ed pays income tax at the rate of 20% on the first 679 euro he earns and 40% on the balance. He has a weekly tax credits of 63.46 euro. How much income tax does Ed pay? So we're going to get 20% of 679 euro. So that's coming from the question. That's 135.80 euro. And then we're going to subtract 679 euro from the 875 gross wage from the start of the question. And that leaves us with 196 euro, which is the balance. So we have to get 40% of the balance. So 40% of 196. So that's 78.40 euro. So the gross tax is going to be the tax of 20% plus the tax of 40%. So the tax of 20% is 135.80 euro. That came from up here. And the tax of 40% is 78.40 euro. That came from here. So adding them, we get 214.20 euro. So that is the gross tax. So the net tax is going to be the gross tax minus the tax credits. And the tax credit in the question is 63.46. So 214.20 euro minus 63.46 euro leaves us with 150.74 euro. So that is the net tax. So how much income tax does Ed pay? He pays 150.74 euro. And this is a 10-mark question. Part 2. Ed pays USC on his gross wage. He pays 0.5% on the first 231 euro. He earns 2% on the next 163 euro and 4.5% on the balance. Find the total amount of USC that Ed pays this week. So USC at 0.5%, it's going to be 0.5% multiplied by 231, which is 1.155 euro. We get USC at 2%, so then 2% of 163 euro is 3.26 euro. And then USC at 4.5%, so it's going to be 4.5% multiplied by 481. So 481 ends up being the balance. So to get the balance, we're going to do 875 minus 231 minus 163 leaves us with 481. So we get 21.645 euro. So the total USC, we're going to add up the three amounts. 1.155 plus 3.26 plus 21.645. So we get 26.06 euro. So that's the total amount of USC that Ed pays this week. Part 3. Ed also pays PRSI on his gross wage. His net take-home pay is €663.20. Find the percentage rate at which Ed pays PRSI. So income tax is 150.74. That's from Part C1. USC is 26.06. That's from Part C2. And net pay is equal to gross pay minus income tax minus USC minus PRSI. So the gross pay is €875. That came from Part C. So in the question, the very first sentence in Part C. So that's the gross pay or gross wage. The income tax is 150.74. So that came from Part CI. So just to show you there, so Part CI, 150.74. So that's where the 150.74 came from. The USC is 26.06. So that came from Part CII. So there's Part II, and there's the 26.06 where that came from. And then we're going to minus the PRSI. So we have 663.20, which comes from the question, equals 875 minus 150.74 minus 26.06 minus PRSI. So 875 minus 150.74 minus 26.06 gives us 698.2. So we have 663.2 is equal to 698.2 minus the PRSI. So the minus PRSI comes over the equal sign and becomes positive PRSI. It's like carrying over an X. And we bring down the 698.2. Then the 663.2 comes over the equal sign, becomes minus 663.2. So then 698.2 minus 663.2 gives us €35. So the PRSI amount that Ed pays is €35. So we want the percentage rate. So it's going to be 35 over €875. So that's his gross wage. That's from Part C, the start of Part C. So 35 over his total gross wage. So 35 over 875 times 100 gives us 4%. Don't forget to stick on your percentage symbol. So the percentage rate at which Ed pays PRSI is 4%.